Let's hop into it. Number 4 versus number 5. Houston Dash hosting Kansas City Current, PNC Stadium. That one's kicking off 5 p.m. Eastern on Paramount Plus. Look, these are two teams who've played each other several times this year. We're talking about throwing it back to the Challenge Cup, the 2022 Challenge Cup. 3 regional groups, 3 divisions. These two teams sort of lumped in together in a central regional group. Played each other a few times in the group play there. Have played each other a couple times in the regular season. And now they are going to be meeting for their 5th time in a NWSL quarterfinal. And that has been weighing on my mind in this one, Lisa. Like when we're looking at that, I'm like, is there something like familiarity that's going to come into play and sort of make this game a little bit wonky at any point or time? But the excitement around it, maybe let's like actually start there, right? But besides giving the context behind it of these two teams sort of having played each other a handful of times this year, it's the first postseason appearance for these two franchises, right? Number 4, number 5. That's exciting. Houston Dash is getting a chance to host their first home NWSL playoff game at their stadium, and they're already making headlines around that. I loved seeing that drop the other day. If you're joining us live, the Houston Dash organization announced yesterday on Wednesday that they're already broke a record, that they are set to host the largest crowd ever in team history for that first playoff match. They are at 14,000 tickets sold already. They are looking to smash that even further. There's still time. We're doing this on a Thursday in the morning.
Go get your tickets.
This game,
everyone in Houston, go get your tickets. Sunday. It's all over their Twitter. Sunday. Go get them.
You've got time. Like there's still time to do this. I want to go to this match. Like looking at them announce this. Not only are there some great ticket packages going on, it's some really, really good price points, but they are putting together a really fun event. They are actually like making this, a playoff event,
as they should.
They're going to have all kinds of fan engagement. They announced entertainment that they're going to be having there. They're bringing back a Houston legend in WNBA, former player Cheryl Swoops. She's going to be available and, interacting with fans. I love it. Like it's absolutely setting the scene. It is setting the stage.
Oh, completely.
For a playoff game. I love it.
They're doing everything right in Houston right now because, as you mentioned, they've already broke that attendance record at over 14,000 tickets sold. They're looking to push that envelope a little bit farther. You mentioned all the great fan fest activities and appearances of people. Houston's doing a deal right now. It's the 713, which is Houston's area code. So it's $7 game tickets. $1 hot dogs and $3 beers. If you're not going for the soccer, you're going for the $4 dinner because how can you not? I mean, that's amazing.
I love that. I love the way you math that and remarketed it. It's so good.
Numbers aren't my strong suit, so
Well, look, there's also a cool giveaway. Like you're one of the first 10,000 fans in there. You're getting a rally towel. Which, look, big fan of the rally towel. I don't think we see that enough at a soccer game, quite frankly. You see it in basketball games or baseball or NFL games. I think that's like a very like a American bit of like sporting culture, and I love that that's a bit of a crossover here for Houston and their playoff soccer game. So it's been exciting to sort of have this kind of seat, this sort of seat on the internet, sort of seeing all of these things coming out with Houston, Dash President Jessica O'Neill really sort of taking this head on and, saying that the franchise has embraced the opportunity to be part of history on Sunday. And they really wanted to make sure that they capitalize on this moment. And it looks like they're still building on it in the days remaining leading up to Sunday. So the scene is set as far as I'm concerned, Lisa. The scene is like set. So there is going to be a very good environment. in this playoff game. Houston are the host. I know you probably got it ready already, so I'm going to give this to you because we got to start leaning into picks and what we think might play out. Who's your winner in this one? And when we should probably let the folks know maybe a little bit of the history between these two teams this year.
For sure. Sandra, of course, I've got it laid out. Don't worry. I've got all my stats. I've got my notebooks. I've got everything ready.
I toss them up and you knock them out, buddy. That's how it goes.
I mean, it is playoffs in baseball right now, of course. So when we look at this, as you just said, Sandra, Houston has set the scene perfectly for themselves to be at home for this first ever club playoff game, and they get to host it. Like, that's huge for them, but they need that extra little bit of help because Houston has never beaten Kansas City at home in Houston. They played throughout the Challenge Cup, and they played twice during the regular season. During the Challenge Cup, Kansas City won both of those matches against the Dash, and then throughout the regular season, they split them. But at home, the Dash have never beaten the Current. So they need that little bit of extra help from the fans in the Houston Stadium. We also have to reflect on how Houston ended their regular season because they went out on a bang. They beat Washington 2-1 to end the regular season. And I love to look at that last regular season game. And as a coach, as a player, I'm sure Houston dissected that match against Washington and said, okay, how do we improve? How do we get better? Right? They had international break. They gave the players a little bit of time off this past week to kind of reset mentally, get their bodies in check. But when looking at game film, you have to assess the variables, the controllables that you can control and sometimes what you can't. And when you play a game, sometimes your opponent just nails a rocket of a shot. You did everything you could, but like, hey, they're going to score that. And like, that's okay. That's why it's called a game, and you have to get 2 more than them. But in this last match that Houston played against Washington, they conceded a penalty kick to Andy Sullivan, and then they forced an own goal. So these are some of the controllables that Houston can control. You can't give up a penalty kick, especially in the postseason, in the playoffs, especially going up against a Kansas City side that's got Lola Bonta knocking down 5 of her 6 penalty kicks this year. Houston cannot give up a foul in the box because Kansas City is going to knock it dead. And they did that again against Washington, so they can learn from that mistake. But then Houston also forced an own goal to get the win over Washington. They put so much pressure on the Spirits back line. Nichelle Prince ends up getting stuck in, and they force an own goal, which gives Houston the win. So that's another controllable that Houston can control. Keep their foot on the gas pedal, keep pressure as high as they can against Kansas City, and keep going for it. When you look at the coaching staff, Juan Carlos Amaros, he's stepped in July. He hasn't played against Kansas City yet. I think that's really important to talk about because Juan Carlos Amaros has turned this team around for Houston, and he's created this culture of ruthlessness, of defensive efforts all over the pitch. He helped Ebony Salmon, right? She steps in July 1st, ends up getting 9 goals, leading the team with a hat trick and a brace. But Juan Carlos Amaros has changed the culture a little bit at Houston, and he's never gone up against Matt Potter and this Kansas City side. So that gives Houston a bit of an advantage over Kansas City as well. In terms of like lineups and formation that these two sides have, most recently Kansas City's been playing in like a 3-5-2 and Houston's been in a 4-3-3. So numbers wise, I think Houston would have the advantage up top, right? If you've got Sanchez, if you've got Prince up there, you've got Salmon running at Kansas City's back line. I think that gives you an advantage. And we've never seen these two sides play against each other in the current form that they're in. So that's one of the things I am most excited for, to see how Kansas City's back line matches up against Houston's front line with their speed, with their ability to attack in a variety of ways, whether it's down the flank, sending crosses in, getting shots from distance. We've seen that a lot from Houston this year. So how does Kansas City combat that? Now for the Kansas City Current side, their last regular season game was disappointing, I'm going to say, right? It was a 1-0 loss to Racing Louisville. They lost this one in the stoppage time, Jess McDonald getting the goal for Louisville. But the overall and the overarching theme for Kansas City this year has been a complete 180 from 2021. Kansas City won 3 games in 2021. They've turned that around and they've won 10 this year. They went on a 13-game undefeated streak. They've made the postseason. They are rocking and rolling. Now, they don't have Desiree Scott. in this match against Houston.
Big.
Desi got 2 yellows and a red card in the last match for Kansas City against Racing Louisville, so she's out. And that's a big, big loss because not only on the field does she do so much, because she's that defensive block that can break up Houston's attack as they get going, give a bump to Salmon as she gets running. But Desi is also a veteran. She's also played in postseason. She's also been around this team, and she understands kind of how to lead it. That's huge for them. So when you look at that, now it's kind of like, how does Kansas City reinforce their defensive efforts? Because up top, I'm not too worried about Kansas City, right? They've got CeCe Kaiser, they've got Kristen Hamilton, those 2 players combining for nearly half of all of Kansas City's goals this year. 13 goals between Kaiser and Hamilton of Kansas City's 29. And then they've got Lola Bonta with 7 goals as well right under them. So they can score. They've got a variety of players doing it at high quantities. But I think it really comes down to how Kansas City defends against Houston's attack.
Okay. I'm hearing you out. But I'm not hearing a pick.
I didn't give one yet.
All right. So here's where I'm looking at. Besides all of the amazing things that you just mentioned, yes, we started off this conversation in this match talking about how there's familiarity between these 2 teams. But I'm with you 100%. It's 2 different teams who are going to be meeting each other under far different circumstances than they did in any of those other previous games. We're talking about a Challenge Cup that still has all of those kind of pre-season-y feelings around it. Players still getting their legs under them, getting fitness back up, kicking off the rust of an off season. And then you've got 2 games in May and early July before they even, Houston puts in their new head coach, before I think people actually were taking note of Kansas City and the performances that they were putting together during the 2022 season. And now they're just in different phases. The rosters are different compared to the last time, any of the times that they met, mentioning players like an Ebony Salmon for Houston or somebody like a CeCe Kaiser for Kansas City Current. It's going to be big. I think it's massive to have somebody like Scott missing from this roster for Kansas City. I think it might open up a window of opportunity in that middle third for Houston, especially if the intent is to, start your own warrior in the middle third there, and somebody like a Sophie Schmidt, right? Sort of help dictating and disrupting things there. I'm curious about this match that has so many promising attackers, ones that have excited us throughout the entire regular season. If this is going to actually boil down to more of a gritty defensive battle and goalkeeper match than actual high octane energy. I'm looking in between the posts. I'm looking at Adriana Franch. I'm looking at Jane Campbell. I cannot wait to see these 2 goalkeepers go head to head in this quarterfinals, having to sustain attacks from all of these different attackers on each side of the pitch. So when I was looking at this game, I was like, actually, this could maybe come down to some defensive things. And I'm also like, when you're looking at maybe centering on Houston here, looking at their defensive shape, and in front of Jane Campbell, you've got a Katie Naughton, the Iron Woman for Houston Dash, one of 5 Iron Women in NWSL this year to have played every single minute to date. I could not believe throughout the regular season this was someone who did not make any of the teams of the month throughout her regular season. I think she has been an absolute captain of that back line, more than an anchor. Absolutely someone who's able to help things remain organized for that Houston Dash side. And I really also, I think Nan's ability to sort of spearhead and distribute things from that position is a little bit undervalued and a little bit underrated. So I'm wondering if this game is gonna come down to one of these like we got to try something moments and like random long ball over the tops from a certain center back in the hopes that one of those attackers gets on the end of it, And I'm also looking at, for some of these players, we were talking a lot about firsts in this in this game, and you mentioned how Scott being absent was one of those veteran presence, for the current that can, provide that type of leadership. And I'm sure she's still doing that, even though she's not going to be participating in game in this one. But I'm looking at that too. This is going to be, a first NWSL playoff for, somebody like an Ebony Salmon. This is going to be a first NWSL playoff for somebody like a CC Kaiser. What do those players look like under, these types of bright lights and big match moments? I'm eager to see it. Absolutely, 100%. But I think that there's enough, we'll just say general experience on both of these teams to sort of help even things out, whether it's in the goalkeeper position for both teams, whether it's even in the midfield, whether it's if you're looking at a Schmidt for Houston, if you're looking at a Labonta for Kansas City, I'm curious if the wingers, if might sort of cancel each other out here as well. I'm looking at Mace going up potentially against Sanchez at any point in the game. What does that look like in this?
Yes.
I think more than anything, I'm also looking at those little individual battles, right? Those little duos that we'll be seeing, throughout the game. I think there's the potential for this to be a highly competitive match, but I don't know if I'm entirely convinced that it's going to be this sort of massive blowout, kind of like wild scoreline type of game.
So you're suggesting right now that you think it's going to be low scoreline, tight scoreline, maybe even like going into extra time because of the goalkeeper battle. And I mean, honestly, I respect that because these goalkeepers, Franch, Campbell, they are tremendous. They have kept their teams in games all year.
I don't know if it'll go into.
I'm thinking goals though.
I think there's going to be goals. I think this game could get tied up in regulation. I do.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it'll be like a heavy score. Like I'm not seeing like a 3-2 or anything like that. I'm thinking like maybe a 1-0 or even like a possibility of like a 2-1.
Okay, so we're giving score lines, we're giving goals, but we have still yet to pick winners. I'm going to give you mine.
Okay.
Despite everything that we just talked about, and with both of these sides, this was probably the hardest one for me to pick between both of these sides because they are so evenly matched in terms of like how they've gotten to this point, their nitty grittiness, their mentality. But I think Kansas City's going to win. I think that they just have a little bit more to them, a little bit more depth, a little bit more swagger to what they can do. I think Matt Potter and his experience as a coach will help Kansas City in a moment like this where they're in an environment that is incredibly hostile towards Kansas City. I imagine these Houston fans are going to be there screaming for the dash. And I also think that we're going to get more goals than you're suggesting. I think that we could see like a 2-1, maybe not a 3-2, but like a 2-1 scoreline. I would like it to be wrapped up in regulation as well, but I am giving this win to Kansas City. I think they are going to advance and take on OL Reign in the semis.
Okay, so you forecast Kansas City going to a semifinal.
Yes.
OL Reign in this one.
Yes.
All right, I'm with you on that. Look, the other side of this, Lisa, that was so difficult to make this pick is hearing you go through and recap sort of those final games with each of these teams. I think there's some silver linings there, but I was also looking at the trend of these teams going into these playoffs. And for me, looking at both Houston and Kansas City, they were a little bit streaky for me towards the end of the season, quite frankly, going into these playoffs. And you want to sort of, enter the playoffs in a good form, top form, kind of, the concept of peaking at the right time, right? So you're talking about maybe going into a postseason if you're Kansas City, two losses, a win, a draw, in your last 4 games, building up to the playoffs. Houston Dash, not too much different. They've got 2 wins, a loss, a draw, last 4 games
Yeah.
going into there. So I was like, it's a little bit slightly streaky for me, which is also what made like me go back and forth in terms of being able to pick who's going to come out of this one. But you're going with Kansas City Current, and we've both been high on this team throughout the entire year, and it's partly why I'm going to be going with Houston Dash in this one.
Wow.
I'm going the opposite. I'm going to be going with the home side in this one. I really like what this team has been doing this year. I think they have shown they have the mental capacity and physical ability to be able to make those adjustments as they see fit throughout the entire season. And they have had multiple coaches at this point getting them through the remainder of the season. They have had, multiple. They've had the departure of was ultimately their franchise player.
Yep.
Go play overseas. Rachel Daly's now in Women's Super League. Moved on to a different, better opportunity for her. And they made adjustments throughout the season in integrating, mid-season players. And I'm excited to see the return of Maria Sanchez to an NWSL postseason where she's actually going to be getting minutes, meaningful, impactful minutes during a playoff. We could see what she could do. Another player similar to Naughton, who I was very surprised to have not made any team of the month during the regular NWSL season. I believe she made the team of the Challenge Cup team overall, but no appearances throughout the regular season and those accolades. So I'm going with Houston Dash in this one because I think if there's something that's going to prove its worth in the playoffs is the scene and environment and the setting. And I think the franchise is doing a very good job of trying to provide that backdrop. And I think it's going to be necessary for Houston as they go ahead and try to get not only their first playoff appearance, but get that first playoff win. You're going Current. I'm going Dash. I love the parody. We'll have to see who's correct and what's going on here.